Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. It's lovely to see you all for our final forum of the year. Hello, the lovely Sarahs. It's very nice to see you both. I'm just changed my vision so I can see more people. Wait, sorry. Oh, let's try that again. There we go. Hello to those who don't know me. If you have not met me before, my name is Rosie. I am the Director of Learning at Herman, and I usually Zoom in from Brisbane, but I just made it in time in the Sydney office, uh, about 2 minutes before you guys did. And very happy to see you here for our final forum of the year. Hi, Margaret, to some people who are certified with me. Tammy, nice to see you. And some faces I've seen before, but I don't think I certified you, but I know who you are. I've heard you spoken about. Feel free to, before we begin, let me know in the chat, where are you zooming in from today? And I'll see what time zones we are talking to. I know we're talking to New Zealand. Kia ora to those of you in New Zealand. Welcome. It's lovely to see you. Western Australia. Got your coffee, Dave? It's early there. Yes, Dave. I just saw you before.
Yep, breakfast has been had.
Breakfast. Breakfast. Excellent. Excellent. Well, we only have a small group registered today, but that doesn't really bother me. It means I can perhaps spend some time asking you guys your specific questions. Today's session is about maximizing teams, specifically working with the team profile and the team effectiveness dashboard, and combining these two reports to start to shift the dial with teams. And so I'm going to go through what that deck looks like. I'm going to share maybe some stories about how I've run and facilitated sessions like this. And perhaps you can, if you want to, in the chat, let me know if you've got stories to share around this topic as well. But before we get started, I'm actually going to start with a breakout. It's not going to be a long breakout, maybe five-ish minutes. And it's a very simple question, and it's the question I get the most about this topic when I talk to it is why have we called it maximizing teams? Because everyone has their own way of referring to this concept of improving teams, enabling teams, elevating teams, leveraging teams, and so maximizing is the word that we talk about. It's also different to how we used to talk about teams with whole brain thinking at Herman, where we were much more focused on understanding team dynamics. And if you've been in any of my forums recently and heard me talk about this word understanding, you'll know that it's not a dial shifting word. Understanding is not a word that changes and shifts a dial for a team. So what I'd love for you to talk about in this first breakout of about 5 minutes is, what does maximize teams mean to you and your partner in this breakout? Or maybe you'll have a small group of three. And then when you come back, I just want one person can just take a couple of notes or dot points in the chat and then copy that chat back into the main room so we can all hear about our similar and or different. I'm curious what the answer is. How are we going to respond to this topic of maximizing teams? What does that word actually mean? Remember, there is no right or wrong answer here. I'm just really curious in what that word, how it lands with you, what it means, and how it might resonate for your groups. So just give me a little minute to random. I'm going to do some random breakout groups here. Hold on 2 seconds. Okay, so I've randomly allocated you to a room. Um, and I'm just checking. This always happens. Hold on to. Oh. No, I think we've got at least two people in every room. Yep. Okay, cool. We do. There are some Herman staff as well. So if you're a Herman staff member, I'm expecting you to be taking the notes for your colleagues, your lovely colleagues, and listening in so you can collect that back. If you don't have a Herman staff member with you, just voluntold someone to make a couple of notes for you, and we will see you back here. I'll give you about 7 past. I'll give you about 7 minutes. So what does Maximise Teams mean to you and your audience? I'll see you back here soon. All right, everyone's zooming back into the room slowly as the breakout countdown is on. Not everyone is back yet. If you have returned back to the breakout room and you were the voluntold or volunteer of the group for the notation, please copy your thoughts into the chat. What does Maximise Teams mean to you and or your audience? If you didn't have an answer, dot, dot, dot is fine. That also tells me something. So I'm just checking. Everyone's back in. Oh, yep. All right, everybody's back now. Welcome. Now, if you could just pop yourselves on mute so we don't get any fallback of my voice. If you were the voluntold volunteer for your group, please pop a couple of notes into the chat. Oh, we've got huge notes. This is good. So we're just going to have a quick look through, and then I'm going to cracking on the session. So what does maximizing teams mean? So really understanding the thinking styles of the team, making it explicit in teams, maximizing thinking styles, building trust. Yeah. Finding the full potential of teams and their abilities and uniqueness in a safe environment. Yes, very true. Harnessing, amplifying the team's cognitive diversity. Optimize instead of maximize, optimal results instead of just growing. Yeah, there's another word we could use and add to the vocabulary. Working with the dynamic of the team to optimize the way they work together. Finding the untapped, leveraging all contributions, maximizing what people can do. And another group, getting the most out of the HBDI, understanding it oneself, how to apply to others, dealing with challenges, new ideas, a whole lot of applications, pathways and guidance, who are the key influences, effectiveness versus maximization, question mark. Yeah, very good. Effectiveness, I can come to that. It's sort of a question without posing a question, but what's the difference between effectiveness and maximizing? I might come back to that in a minute. Ralph, that was Ralph. Lots of current feelings around already being maximized with less resources. Yeah, maxed out, burnt out. Good point. Use the profile info to benefit oneself, maximize teams' diversity in thinking, maximizing communication. James has got reaching a team's full potential, return on investment. Yeah, and then the ROI model, which is one of our models in the PRAC portal, return on investments, return on interactions. So investments, blue quadrant, interactions, red quadrant, implementations, green quadrant, and innovations, was it? Yellow quadrant. So looking at it through a whole brain lens. All right, we can keep, should we be optimizing rather than maximizing? Okay, so some really good questions here and some good thoughts. And the reason that we're going with maximizing is one, it is actually a question that we measure in the team effectiveness dashboard. So it is something that we can look at shifting the dial on. So people are self-reporting to this. Are you as a team, what's your perspective on the team working to its maximum potential? So because of that particular question in the team effectiveness dashboard, it gives us the ability to do something we haven't focused on a lot, which is shifting a dial and saying, let's measure how we think we're performing and operating and functioning and focusing as a team now. And let's think about how, and then we do it again and think about whether that number has changed. And that rating rather has changed in terms of how we are maximizing what we've got. What are we doing with what we've got? Are we actually working well with what we have at our disposal? Or disposable, as my son calls it. So when, rather than effectiveness, which is hard to universally measure in teams because different teams have different functions. Is it effectiveness around output? What does that output look like? If we start to go into a team effectiveness, which isn't actually a terrible idea, it's a very good idea, but we need to be very clear on what effectiveness means to that team. And so part of this shift around the slides that I'm going to go through today, we don't just want a team to understand themselves. We want them to understand themselves in order to be able to adapt and to flex to do the things that need to get done. Because what teams need to do and what they prefer to do are not always the same thing. And if we bring a whole brain thinking lens on top of that, a team that's having to focus on the implementation of a product, but they're actually the product conceptualization team is having to operate in a different way to perhaps their initial preferences. And so maximizing a team is really about taking what you've got and using the potential in that team. And the potential doesn't just mean the thinking of the team, it also means the adaptability of the team, doing the things that we might not prefer. So let me jump now. If you've got any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. But I'm not sure what you're going to see when I click this. Can you see my slide? That's hopefully what you can see. The demo didn't show that. Okay, awesome. So I'm just setting you guys up so I can see all your lovely faces and pop the chat here as well. Okay, so maximizing teams is why is it important? Well, understanding is not enough. Understanding how the team prefers to think, what they like to do, it's good, it's helpful, but it's the starting point. Maximizing is about shifting the dial. It's about taking what you have and making sure that you are using it efficiently, effectively, whatever those other things look like. And we can also measure it by using the team effectiveness dashboard. In fact, that's probably a relevant question right now to ask. Who out there has actually used and worked with the team effectiveness dashboard? If you have, say, yes, I have. If you have not, say, no, I have not, because this is going to help me gauge how much detail I go into when I talk through that part of the report. So we're wanting to shift a dial. We also, as I said just previously, we want teams to be agile and work adaptively because what they need to do isn't always what they prefer to do. So how do we get them to operate in an agile way? And how can we link that to whole brain thinking? Because whole brain thinking is a safe, non-judgmental language. It's a productive way to help people understand and connect to agility. Just because I don't prefer it doesn't mean I can't do it. But it is getting to the end of the year. So the more I have to do my tax, which is what my husband wants me to do next week, the less appetite I have. And I'm trying to push him to next year, where my energy might be a little more preferred. But we can consider things in a whole brain way. So I'm just having a quick look. Okay, so one person's used the team effectiveness dashboard. Okay, so might not even know about the team effectiveness dashboard. Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that. That was a good question to ask. I'm going to move into the blue quadrant. So in this session, when the session that I'm talking about is a fully design session that is available to you in the practitioner portal for download. And my lovely Steph is always on top of these things. So I'm just going to throw in the deep end, can put a link to the rollout tab in the chat for us. And you're going to see, I can probably show you at the end. So that session focuses, it's got some key objectives. What constitutes a powerful team? How could we impact team performance? That's where we're looking at this thing called the Team Effectiveness Dashboard, or the TED, which I'm not supposed to call it, but acronyms much easier. The Team Effectiveness Dashboard. Then how do we use that understanding of the TED to explore our team profile? That's what you know to be. Second question, who's worked with and used the HBDI team profile? It's not the Team Effectiveness Dashboard, the actual team profile. Pop it in the chat. Who's worked with the team profile? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So yep, that's the 16-page report that I'm also going to show you through today, but I might spend a little less time on that, a bit more time on the team effectiveness dashboard. And when you combine these two things, because the dashboard looks at what the team thinks they're focusing on, it's a self-report assessment. that says, yes, we're focusing on collaboration or innovation or implementation, and we're working to our potential. And they also have the opportunity to say, here are the strengths of our team, here are the challenges of our team, and there's some other questions in there too. Once you pull together what the team thinks about themselves and what the team profile says, then you can put your strategies in place to improve, aka maximize, aka shift the dial, change the way, or improve the way, or maximize, I said that already, the way the team's performing and working together. So these two things work very nicely together. Therefore, when working with this deck, you will need to have asked your thinkers to do the team effectiveness dashboard questionnaire, which is a completely separate questionnaire to the HBDI before the team profile. To my lovely Herman staff, you should take note of these people in the room and see if there's something we can help them learn more about this, because we don't know much about the team effectiveness dashboard at this point. So I didn't realize that it was mostly a no. So we might even do a specific session on just that report. Today is actually about all of it together. So let me know by the end if you want a deeper dive. So when you come into the session, you've done the team profile and you've done the dashboard. Now, the reason this is incredibly valuable for a facilitator is you know what the team is thinking about their thinking, even if they don't understand whole brain thinking yet. You've asked them what are their strengths and challenges, and they've typed it in and they've said, oh, I got a great boss, or nah, the boss is a bit rusty. They've actually filled in their own perspective. So you don't just have the leader's perspective. I don't know how many times before I use this, I'd walk in and the leader told me one thing, and I walk in the room and the team tells me something completely different. Well, the TED pulls this out because everyone is allowed to have a voice. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, to contextualize these slide decks a little bit, you will hear me continuously refer to this rollout roadmap. And this is a new tab that Steph kindly shared in the chat for us. And what we've started to do and make available for you are fully comprehensive slide decks to take you through the main steps of rolling out whole brain thinking for embedded impact. So not just having a nice to experience workshop, but actually saying, what is it? What's the strategy? That's where we start. What are you trying to achieve with whole brain thinking and the HBDI? And moving through a sequence of steps to get towards impact. And today I've talked in past forums, I've done a little bit on strategy, on engaging. I think recently a Get Started, I've talked to that session as well. And I think the last session I ran was on the Enable Leaders. My memory's a bit rusty, but I think that was last time. And this time I'm talking about the team session. So if you go into that rollout tab, you're going to find a slide deck, a facilitator guide, a workbook you can download and print or share with your groups for these sessions. Step 6, the business of thinking is almost there. It should be there by the end of the year, if not January. So if you're hanging out for that, it's coming very, very soon. So you'll be able to access all of those modules as well. And then we'll keep talking through this rollout to really support you. Do you have to use it? Absolutely not. Can you change it if you want to? But what it is over the last 2 years, I've spent hours interviewing, questioning hundreds of practitioners and saying, the ones who have embedded it, I should say, the ones who have taken it to this embedding in onboarding, sales training, marketing, all different ways. And these were the steps that they shared. And so we built it out as a framework. So today, Maximise Teams is what we are diving into. And I will move into the session. So now you'll see that I'm in the slide deck, and this is the deck that's available. So Carleen said, has the business of thinking product changed and been updated? So the business of thinking product is updated in that you can now access it for free. So you no longer have to pay for it. And you can buy workbooks. Sorry, for any of these sessions, you can purchase workbooks that we've printed if you want and like that. That still has a cost associated, but you do not have to. And another update in the business of thinking is that there's a guide that describes how you might run the session face-to-face in the physical classroom as well as in the virtual classroom like we are today. So when those are updated, it'll probably get notified about that in January next year, and you'll be able to see those there. So this is the Maximise Teams session, Maximising Teams with Whole Brain Thinking, and it is designed as a half day session, so about 4.5 hours if you're going to go through everything. It starts with a checklist, so this shouldn't be a surprise, but before you get into a team session, the thinkers you're working with need to understand their HBDI and whole brain thinking, either through a group debriefing experience or this Get Started with Whole Brain Thinking deck or one-on-one debriefing. But they already understand their profile, they understand the 4 quadrants of the model, and they've had a bit of an exploration of how that plays out in a work context. This session is specifically designed for teams who want to change and grow or maximize what they have, their abilities, performances, how they're behaving really, what they're doing day to day. So there is a guidebook that you can use that comes with this session. So all of the activities can be documented in that guidebook, used virtually or printed. And then the outcomes I shared already on the previous slide. So I'll jump into green quadrant. Now we start with the green quadrant very early because this is about safety. I need to understand when I'm running this what the team feels about sharing and discussing comfortably and safely in the group. So before I even come into a session, I've emailed every team member if they've already done HBDI and I'm coming back and I say, are you feeling comfortable sharing still? Are you happy to talk about your profile and your experiences in the team? Because they need to provide me their consent to do that. Even though the reports are obviously confidential, you can't tell who's who, I do want to create that safe space. And so this is the place to talk through that. And I think I might have shared this in a recent forum, but I recently walked into a team where the leader had said out loud, make sure you leave your emotions at the door. There's no place for them in this room. And so, emotional thinking or thinking from an emotional perspective is one of our key descriptors in the HBDI. And this team was very uncomfortable sharing. And why? Because the team's highest preference quadrant was red. And this leader, who didn't have the similar thinking to the team, had sort of said, I don't want that at work, don't bring it to work. So, right on slide 2 of my deck, I had to do some unpacking of that before we could move through some of the other parts of the session. So what does unpacking mean? That means, well, what does emotional thinking bring to the workplace? Why do we value it? Why do we need it? Okay, but what's the flip side of that equally? And so how can we balance those two things? So that's a bit about what that looks like. And it was an ongoing conversation in that group, as some of you could imagine. Then we get into the why are we here? The core objective is to apply whole brain thinking and enable teams to maximize their potential. Learn how to work cohesively together because did you know? I mean, you did, but did your thinkers know that how teams prefer to think and the task demands are not always aligned? And that is the challenge. So I then start with a values-driven exercise where actually I personally don't show this, but I say, okay, I want to articulate a couple of values and we're going to map them to the quadrants. So either for the team as a whole for this session or for the team moving forward, I just need some ground rules, some key values of how we behave and how we operate together as a team so that when one of the values of that team where the leader said no emotions, it was, okay, no judgment is one of our values. So anytime we hear a judgment call in the team, we're going to call that out and say, hey, I can hear us making a judgment right now, and that doesn't create a feeling of psychological safety today. So we're just going to pause on that judgment. And so this is the opportunity to create those ground rules for how you're going to engage moving forward. It's a bit like saying, are you guys on the bus or are you not on the bus? Because not everyone always wants to be on the bus with the team, and not everyone's come to the session happily. They've been told they have to be there and they have to participate. And so setting these collectively is a good way to say, hey, this is the bus we're all on today, and this is what we're going to be doing, and this is how we're going to be operating. So you can add your own values in as well if you need to. So now we've kind of laid the groundwork. Now we're getting into the next. So that was, I think, 30 minutes, 45 minutes of that intro. Now we're getting into learning about maximizing teams, and I'll start with a story, a sport one, which I always get nervous talking about. I'm not a sport person. I'm a theatre girl through and through. So my sporting analogies are a bit rusty, but here goes. Oops. Um, the Canberra Raiders a couple of years ago did some great work with whole brain thinking in the HBDI, and sporting teams can give us very strong models of how powerful teams operate. And when you start to unpack why, you can sort of peel back the layers and recognize how they are operating in our four quadrants. So if you think the Canberra Raiders came along and they had one purpose, one vision, one mission, one why. Do you know what that was? Put in the chat. What do you think the Canberra Raiders, a National Rugby League team, what was their why? Yeah, Arlene, I agree with you. What was their why? Win, but not just win the grand final, win the last round. So they wanted to win the grand final and the year that I cannot remember, because probably on a maternity leave or something. And so then they set themselves goals to do that. So each week they had to move up the ladder. They had to win game week after week after week. They had to bring their best. So, sorry, that was what? What do they have to do each week? Win to move themselves up the ladder in order to get to the grand final, in order to win the grand final, in order to achieve their overall vision. So then week by week, they went by winning each week. And in the red quadrant, they considered who brought what to the table, what skills and talents did they have, how did their thinking play out. This is actually captured in the case study, and there's a great webinar on this topic, so I won't go into huge detail. But every team member contributed to this overall vision, mission, purpose statement, and they used an understanding of whole brain thinking to represent and understand what was happening in terms of what they contributed to the team and its performance. And then the path and process comes in. This is where they have, in theatre land, rehearsal. You rehearse every week, but in sporting land, it's called practice. You go and you practice and you train, you work together, you do your drills, but it's not just about practicing and building that team collaboration, the physicality. It's also about connecting with fans. It's about doing media, press releases. And so there's a whole lot of tactics and processes and behaviors that they go about in order to do this. So then at the end of this process, you start to see how a team operates. But in the real world and in the corporate world, that's not always how teams operate. I'll give you another example of how I observe teams operating. And this is a rowing analogy, much closer to home because my husband's a rower. What I observe in teams when I use a rowing analogy is that everyone thinks they're getting into a rowing 8. There's 8 seats and there's a cox and you're heading to the end of the river and you're all rowing backwards and you know where you're going. But what often happens is everyone just gets in their own single scull and you're, I'm here, yeah, I'm over here, and off we go rowing, but we're not even going to the same endpoint. We're going to different endpoints of the river and we're all in our own boats and we're not working together in the same place to achieve that same objective. And so many teams, when you go into work with them, unless you can recognize that they're in the same boat and heading in the same direction to the end of the river, how do you maximize anything? Because everyone's going in a different direction and everyone thinks that potential is in a different way. And that's why it can be very challenging. That's why the piece about what is effectiveness is a challenging one to answer, because everyone's perspective on effectiveness is, well, effectiveness means we're nice to each other. Oh no, effectiveness means we get the job done. Effectiveness means we know where we're going. So as you start to unpack these words, which is why we even unpacked the Maximise Teams word, you start to uncover the thinking biases and how we bring that to these words. So this is where the team effectiveness dashboard comes in. The team effectiveness dashboard asks specifically, what is the purpose of this team? That's the first step. And what you will perhaps uncover is that teams have different perspectives on the purpose statement. And I use the analogy of rowing to different ends of the river. If we don't know where we're rowing towards the end of the river and that same finish line, then we're going in different directions. And so when your teams fill in this statement, it can be very eye-opening to see whether they are all, driving on the same bus to the same location or whether they're not. And so you can spend some time to unpack, well, what is the actual purpose of this team? What are we trying to do? This is an example of our team when I did a session with us internally. And sometimes you have to ascertain a purpose statement before you come in from the leader, but that is your North Star. And so having that North Star then enables you to move your team through some development, growth, agility work. So if you use the team dashboard, you can have a look at the data and see, is the team heading to the same North Star? Are they going in the same direction? And then after that, it says, so based on that direction, are we actually performing to our maximum potential? And this is the wonderful question where, even though it's one question, you can see a dial shift. You can see a team go, nah, we're not always. Or we're going, yes, we are actually working to our maximum potential. And this is a great piece of data because you can use the dashboard multiple times. You can do it once and then wait 3, 6, 9, 12 months and you can do it again. You can say, have we shifted? And have we shifted in the direction we need to shift? Which is the next slide. Because when you go and discuss with this team, what is getting in the way? Why do some people think you're not working to the maximum potential and some people think you are? I had this report a couple of years ago now, well, quite a few years ago, and the leader was very obvious in how she'd reported. She was like, yes, we are always working to our maximum potential. She was very optimistic, wonderful leader. And when she saw this page, her poor heart just dropped. It's when I recognized that I needed to talk to the leader sometimes about this in advance, because 100% of her team, minus her, had said that we are not working to our maximum potential. So there was something going on there. There was an issue, the disconnect. And what she was telling me and her perspective and what the team was telling me were different. And this actually came out in the follow-up discussion using the dashboard. Which was very powerful because she wanted the team to perform to their maximum potential. She wanted the best for them. She had very good intentions, but not so great execution. So if you listen to my language, can you guess which quadrants she was? Very high yellow thinking leader, less focus on the green quadrant. What did the team want? High green quadrant thinking from her. So then we go into this report about what the team's current focus is. So there's 2 question sets in the dashboard. It says, what are we currently focusing on and what should we be focusing on? And so what this gives you is a bit more information into the current state of play. Now, let's just say hypothetically, this team is saying we're presently focusing more blue and red. And we're not really, and 33% are saying we're not always working to our maximum potential, or we 58% saying somewhat. So there is a dial we can shift here. And what could the dial be? Well, if I go to the ideal focus summary over here, the team wants more red quadrant, whatever that looks like for them. Because they're saying currently we're focusing blue and red and we're doing okay. But ideally, we want more red. And so then we unpack, but what does that red look like? And you can see some of the words that scored more highly with this team. Relationships, communication, collaboration, strategy are coming up. There is a subsequent question there that is about back to our North Star or our purpose statement. Is that what the team truly needs? But this is how you start to create psychological safety with the team, because you start to be able to give them what they're asking for and what they need. And when they have what they're asking for and what they need, then they're more able to be agile and stretch into the quadrants they don't prefer, which could be, I don't know, look at the bottom choices: risk-taking, planning, brainstorming. So on this page, you have, what are we doing now? What are we doing ideally? And then an optional step is, what's the task that we're required to do right now? And what's the thinking needed to do that? And how does this fit? So they're definitely the first 2 conversations. The third one is an optional one. So we would talk to that. Oh, sorry, this is just a placeholder slide. You don't have to use the dashboard. You can still have all of that conversation in a group just by discussing, why are we here? What are we trying to do? What are we accountable for? So you don't have to use the dashboard if you don't want to, but it's a valuable report. But some teams go, overassessed, don't have time for another survey, they won't fill it in, blah, blah, blah. So you can still pose these questions though and have them asked. And then the team goes away to talk about that little breakout for them. How does each team member's purpose statement impact the performance of the team? Well, essentially, what comes out of that conversation is if we all have a different North Star, we all have a different end of the river, it's very hard to be working in the same direction. So we got to get to the same North Star. We talk about what's impacting our ability to perform at the maximum potential, because sometimes it can't be too hard on teams because sometimes it's their context that is showing up this data. It's what's happening in their context that is showing these stretches and these challenges. And are there any quadrants that might need attention? And you can perhaps see that this is now segueing into our next step in a minute, which is going to be the team profile. So I just want to pause there though, because you hadn't seen the dashboard and I'm just seeing some questions. Are mission and vision easy to differentiate? Any suggestions? Do we need a mission statement? I think you're gonna have to form it in the language of the team. So that's why I call it the North Star or um, you know, let's say the vision is like where we're headed, where we're aiming for, and the mission is more philosophical. It's like, do I even care about being on this bus to begin with? I mean, I know where I'm heading, but do I want to be on this mission? Jess has got one for me. A mission defines defines an organization's purpose, how it operates. A vision describes its future state. And so I think they are similar and aligned. I think you've got to choose the language that is going to be right to the team. And I find that analogies help me. And if I can't come up with them, well, Michael Morgan is my boss, and so he comes up with them just like that. But so does AI these days. So it gives me a good balance to think of that. So I think there is an important piece around, where are we heading? Why are we heading there? Do I want to be on this bus towards the direction that we are heading in? And then we will summarize our section, this learning, with some facts. Blue quadrant slide. Sorry, I didn't mention this, but all the slides are color-coded, blue, green, red, yellow, so you're going to see them all showing up throughout. So cohesive teams have a unified purpose. Well-performing teams identify their goals to achieve that purpose. Powerful teams have engaged members who are accountable for their roles and contributions. They want to be on the bus and they want to bring what they bring to the team. And team members can identify and action the critical steps to achieve their goals and fulfill their purpose. It's not very complicated at all. Well, in reality, it's a work in progress. Neil saying, many of the organizations I work with fail to have a purpose and mission statement. Yeah, I think there is something around, well, where are we heading and why are we doing this? Why? What's the bigger reason? Coming back to that internal motivation. His wife stuck around at Herman for now 16 years. All right, let's move on to the team profile section now. So after we've unpacked, this is what the team said about themselves, how they're thinking, and there's more data that's going to show up in a sec. Now we move into, well, how does this correspond to the team and their profile? So around this point, there is an optional working together exercise. So you could get the team to do any kind of team collaboration activity. So if you've ever been in certification recently, there's a graph exercise you do. This is a one about, designing a video, but if you were in the New Zealand Thrive, I ran another simulation. You could throw that in there. This is an opportunity to take the conversation out of work if you need to into some kind of team scenario. Again, optional. You don't have to, but any team scenario you would insert here is, what do you think? Whole-brained in its design. So you're going to see the scenario, no color, and then you're going to see the color coding of the scenario to ask the team, what did they focus on? What did they think about? And I find this helpful for new teams, so teams who don't have existing norms. This is a great way to set them up. And I also find this helpful for teams where there might be the work-based topics might be a bit sensitive to start with. So this is a less threatening way to introduce the conversations, have it do an exercise, debrief it, and then use that as a way to link to the work-related challenges and opportunities they have. As an ex-drama teacher, I have lots of ideas here. So if you ever want one, you can just, send me an email and I can share some other thoughts and ideas. But it doesn't really matter what you choose as long as you're choosing something that is going to illustrate thinking and action and enable them to have a conversation like this. Now, this is the strengths and challenges. These ones actually come from the team effectiveness dashboard. So I've just mapped them to the quadrants. And so you can see how it maps. You could also discuss the strengths and challenges of that team activity if it's more safe for the team to do so. But what you're doing here is having the team reflect on what happens and where this is mapping to the quadrants. Because what the team will probably notice is the strengths and the challenges are going to start to correspond to the team profile. So then I go through the pages of the team profile. Now, as I go through them, this is just how I prefer to facilitate. There are lots of facilitators who do it differently, so there is no best way, but I usually talk through what we're looking at. So here we are looking at a composite. This is each individual profile overlaid. Here we are looking at an average, and I don't really interpret it straight away. I just say the what. This is what it is. And so I go through and say, this is the general representation of the team over here, each team member over here, the average. And I quickly go through the maps just explaining the what. Here is the preference code, the preference map rather, and the preference map under pressure. This gives us an average location of our thinking when we consider all four quadrants combined. And we're looking at in terms of group dynamics and shifting of group dynamics. And I go through each of the pages. Now, I'm not going to explain them to you today in this session because there is an entire course in the practitioner portal on this, me talking for 20 minutes on these pages. So I'm not going to go through them all today. If you want a refresher of what all these pages mean, then go there because you'll hear me talk about them in more detail. But I just wanted to explain that I talk to the what. So the rank order of preferences, this is the order we might go about completing a task in. This is the typical process flow, so the percentage of energy we prefer to spend in various quadrants, as well as that under pressure. This is the distribution of work elements, the adjectives you chose to describe the work you do best and least, and you can see them ordered there on average, most preferred work elements in the team to least preferred work elements, key descriptors, the 8 adjectives to describe the way the team see themselves, and represented by each of the words, but also on average, most selected to, in some cases, not ever selected. Just as an aside, I will tell you that this is how the team can appear to others in the organization. It's a really interesting piece of data to look at how do others perceive your team. It's often showing up in this particular page, how others see that team. Oh, Jess has just shared that, me talking through this page. Thank you. And this is the adjective pair comparison when push comes to shove, what that looks like, as well as the 20 questions. The 20 questions are really helpful if there's a lot of conflict in the team. That's often because you have quite opposing points of view around these descriptions. Some people saying, I strongly agree that we can't break the rules, and others saying, I strongly agree that I'm breaking all the rules. And when you see these points of view that are quite dispersed and different, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it can show up as a bit more conflict in the team. So that's just what we're looking at. Then I give the group, the team in front of me, a couple of pages to focus, to deep dive into. And 2 questions. What are the opportunities and challenges based on the data? And so I collate a couple of pages, break them out into groups, and I get them to tell me the story because they know it better than me. They know what's going on in the data. And if they don't, then they're going to come and ask me, hey, this is a surprise to me. And why is this a surprise? So this is where I don't have to have all the answers about what that data means for the team. The team usually know the answer if I give them time to process it. So this is what I do at this point. They go away, opportunities, challenges. Some teams really love to do a SWOT analysis on this page right now. That's another thing that might show up right here. But either way, they're looking at the data, they're making sense of the data, and then they come back and they report back on what they observed to be the opportunities and challenges. And then we have a discussion about that as a group. And so this is where I've collated the pages. And so if you are curious, I've collated these pages. These are all more the big picture pages. So the composite, the average, the rank order. So they're looking at more bigger picture patterns in the group and what's showing up here. These pages show typical state and under pressure. So the reason I've collated these pages together is purely because of this shift. Is the team under pressure? Which manifestation is more relevant to talk to? But all of these three report pages show both, will show and refer to the under pressure as well as the typical state profile. So that's why they're collated together. This is the work element data collated together, so they talk to that. So this is how the team prefers to get the job done. So when you're talking about the tactics of the team, the processes of the team, this is what they like to do to achieve their goals, their mission, their objectives, the working styles. And the working styles they prefer less. Sometimes anything under a 3, if I was to do a little annotate here, draw up, can you see that? I hit there. Ooh. Anything under a 3 could, as a facilitator, I am looking out that this might be an opportunity for the team to develop based on their context. Because when less than the average select it, it means that it might get overlooked, and that might be a problem depending on what the team is trying to do. Not always, it depends on the context. Context is so important. That's why all that pre-discussion about the dashboard is helpful, because I know so much more about the context. Because I know who cares about technical in this team? It's just not a priority. It's not important for them. It's not part of their working life, their landscape. Or I go, oh no, technical is not a preference, but who's your biggest client? A tech client. What's that mean for that situation? So always taking it in context is very important. So that's the work elements page. Oops, sorry. And this team also, I usually give them a 20 question page to look at as well. And I don't know why oh, there we go. So they have a 20 question page to check through and report back on. And then the last group have the key descriptors. And a lot of facilitators over time have really asked me, what am I looking at here in terms of the key descriptor page? Remember, you're looking at the adjectives the individuals chose to describe the way they see themselves. This team, logical and intuitive. Like we could not get more opposing in the red and the blue. They want sense making, but they want gut feel. They've got critical thinking, and so there's going to be an interesting pull in this team. They like to talk. They want to express. So when I do give them a group exercise, they're probably going to be verbal, which is good. If that speaker talker was down the bottom, I might have to say, okay, Kerry, you're going to be the speaker for this exercise, and Rod, you're going to be the speaker for that exercise, because no one is self-reporting to want to express. So all this information can come up in this particular page here. It's also what the team is going to seek of you as the facilitator. So I know if I'm walking into a team that is rational, critical, logical, analytical, factual, I've got to have my stuff. I've got to know my facts. I've got to know my information when I'm walking into the team, and I've got to create credibility very quickly through that fact-based, logic-based, information-based. Whereas this team, they want logical, but they also want to feel. They want to sense check, and yes, it makes sense. They want 2 things. So it helps me as a facilitator. I always look at this page as a facilitator. What am I about to walk into today? It's a good page. And they also have the 20 questions. So by now, the team started to decode their profile. They've started to connect it to what they're doing and what they're experiencing in the team. And I summarized this chunk of learning, which was, I think, 75 minutes. Like that part I did very quickly, but they're taking time to go through this into this summary of facts. Just a couple of things I might not have said. Data can manifest in helpful and unhelpful ways. Don't always assume that it's, oh no, this is a disaster. Always force yourself to come up with 2 hypotheses. This could look positive in this way. Also, it could look unhelpful in this way. I always come up with 2 hypotheses for every team. Every scenario, every time I make an assumption about a team, I counteract that assumption with, but what else could it look like? Because I don't know the context until I ask. And then we get into application. So this step changes depending on who you are, where you work, and how you're expected to work moving forward. If you are a consultant, at this point, you're looking for future opportunities for development for this team and other work moving forward. So you're going to be coming at it with, how can you continue to help this team? It's not a one-hit thing where you just learn it and you apply it and yeah, they're fixed like that. If you're internal in an organization, you can either find a consultant in a network or you work with the leader to help them unlock the potential of the team. Because I know people in corporates don't always have the time to do the ongoing development work that might be needed that comes out after a session like this. So as we go through this last little section, which I'll go through it pretty quickly, I really want you to think about, for your context, where is this going to take you next in that roadmap? So what is it that you might need to go towards? So when I get to this step, the first slide is back to the red quadrant. Okay, everyone, we've all looked at, our team profile. We've looked at the dashboard. What is it, though, that you love to bring to this team? Come and tell me so that I know, so that everyone knows and everyone in the team gets to share what do you love to bring to the team. We map it to the quadrants. So reminder. And then we start to say, okay, because of that conversation we had previously, we might have identified roadblocks. So just because we have a team has a preference to think in a certain way doesn't mean we have to operate in that way. We can access all quadrants with the right attention. We just need the right strategies to stretch ourselves, and we can use whole brain thinking to design those strategies. So this is where we start to unlock the roadblocks that might have been identified and ideas and possible strategies to overcome roadblocks. Now, I say that cautiously because some teams love to get into solving the problem. It might just be collecting the problem before you solve. You might have to break it down a bit, but roadblocks and ideas to overcome. And then an optional step in prioritization. This is a blue quadrant skill. So just because we found a roadblock in collaboration doesn't mean it's urgent and we need to do it today. We might actually urgently need to get our processes in order so that we meet another need. So this is where you start to force the team into this prioritization discussion, saying, is this an urgent thing that we need? Is it an important thing, or is it a nice to have? Because many teams like to focus on the nice to haves because it's their preference, when we need to start focusing on the urgent things. And this is where you have this discussion with the team. And you can map out, and they start to, so it's an exercise. What do we need to do? Why do we need to do it? How can we do it? Who's involved? By when will it be done? And at what priority is this particular task? And by about now, the team is starting to shift the dial. So you're now thinking, when am I going to come back and do the dashboard again and see whether that team is shifting? And it can be anywhere from, I wouldn't do less than 3 months in my experience, but you might be very gung-ho and very intensive working with a team. But generally 3 months, 6 months, 12 months is when I'm looking at redoing that dashboard again. And then, we might go, oh, communication needs some work, or creative thinking, or thinking about your client needs some work. And on the conversation goes. So the last thing that I'd leave the team with is Mindshift Mail. If they had not already downloaded this, if you do not know what this is, Mindshift Mail is the old brain mail. If you are a long-standing practitioner, it is now available for you free to offer to your thinkers and to enroll yourself. It is a 12-month email subscription. The topics are just on the blue quadrant column here, and it's all designed to keep the learning alive, use and apply whole brain thinking, continue the return on investment, and develop skills. If you want to personally, you can subscribe to this right now if you have not already. I know many of you have because I've seen you in previous forums, but this is an optional next step if the individual wants to start to take this further. The leader could also use it to download exercises and activities to work and develop the team. So that would be the takeaway.